How in the hell can you win offers when 25 to 35% of the offers, depending on your area, are all cash? Well, I'm here to tell you, you can compete. My name is Dan Inman, your local realtor and guide. Let's talk about it. Many of today's sellers are looking for some flexibility. If they're going to be going out and making a purchase on the back end of this, or even going into today's rental market, which can be just as competitive as the purchase market, they may need some flexibility with that move. So being able to go out and make an offer on the next home purchase without that home sale contingency can really give them a leg up and make your offer on their home even more competitive. There are a couple ways to do this. One, you can offer to close whenever's most beneficial to them. Maybe that's a 30 or 45 or a 60-day closing window. But what I've seen actually work best is being able to do a really quick close and then giving them a rent back period afterwards. Now, if you order the appraisal immediately after you get under contract, the thing that is probably gonna cause the most hang up, some lenders can close in as quick as 2 weeks.
Hey babe, we just got the clear to close on the Smith file in 12 days.
Babe, I'm in the middle of being a YouTuber and this is feeling a little bit contrived.
I'm so sorry, I just thought you'd want to hear that you got clear to close early for your client.
I appreciate that.
Have you shared with them how easy it is to book an appointment with us on our website?
Honey, I've got it.
Okay, bye.
Sorry about that. Now, if you're looking at doing an early close with a rent back period, and you're doing financing with an owner-occupied loan, which is gonna be most loans for most people, the most you can actually give them is about 60 days because that's what the bank is gonna require. Now, if you're at all concerned with them moving out on time, you can work it out with the closing agent or the attorney to withhold some of those closing funds for when they actually move out of the property to create a little extra incentive to make sure that they move out on time. Next major category you really wanna focus on is getting rid of contingencies. A major one here would be a home sale contingency, right? So if you can actually fully sell and get rid of your home, so if you're gonna use the net proceeds from the sale to buy the next home, you don't want to have that home sale contingency on the offer. The further you are along in that process, the more and more attractive it becomes, but I'm telling you, in today's market, you don't want to have a home sale contingency on there at all. The next major contingency that most people are looking at doing is a home inspection contingency. Now, in the state of Virginia, we are what's called a buyer beware state, which effectively means the majority of the burden of discovery is on the buyer. But in today's market, when you're competing, there may be an opportunity for you to win if you can waive that home inspection contingency in its entirety. You can start off by maybe doing the simplest way, which is having the contingency in place, but basically stating outright that you're not gonna ask for any repairs or you're only looking for major stuff only. Now, if you have the opportunity, let's say that you have a friend or a family member that's in construction, maybe you have them come along with you at the actual first viewing of the home. That way you can do a really deep dive into everything that's there that might give you the confidence to remove that inspection contingency altogether. One of the ways to kind of frame or think about this well is almost kind of like if you were selling a car. If you were to go buy a car and the entire back seat is filled with last night's fast food, the windshield wipers are leaving streaks, they don't have any maintenance records, or it just doesn't show like it's clean or been well taken care of, then you could probably assume that the things that aren't seen probably aren't as well taken care of either. So waiving that home inspection contingency on a place that doesn't show very well might be foolish. If you have the time, maybe you can have your agent ask the listing agent if the seller has any prior inspections. If that home sold anywhere in the last 2 or 3 years and they did a home inspection prior, you may be able to get a hold of that, look through the report, see if there's anything major on there, ask the seller if there's anything that they've actually repaired, and you might be able to waive your inspection contingency altogether, knowing that there's probably not a whole lot that could creep up in a short span of 2 or 3 years. If the seller has a current termite and moisture plan on the property, meaning they have somebody come out and inspect the property and spray for termites on a regular occasion, that company probably can provide a clear termite and moisture letter. A lot of times the sellers will prefer to do it that way because they have a company that they already trust, and it's highly likely that they're not gonna have a whole bunch of repairs that come from a termite and moisture company that you hire that's just looking for some work. Sort of like the state inspection where you show up and then just magically they find things that need to be repaired. Another way to potentially frame this is if you have the cash reserves to put into savings for the first 2 or 3 years, if you're gonna waive that inspection contingency in its entirety, you can just keep that in savings and the whoopsies, oopsies, could have happens that pop up over the next 2-3 years, you have the cash on hand dedicated for that. Now, if items don't pick up or don't arise over the next 2 or 3 years, take that money or that cash reserves and improve the property. One of the major categories you want to focus on next is what's called your EMD. This is your earnest money deposit. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Earnest, well, you're serious. Money, that's what you're using. And deposit, that's what you're doing with that money. That money usually goes and sits with either the broker or the attorney or maybe the title company, but it's going to be set in an escrow account for the closing out of that offer. Obviously, the larger amount that you put down, the more seriously that you are taken. If this is a higher purchase price, it may actually need to be a 1%, 2%, or 3% amount so that it actually looks like you're a solid buyer. If for any reason that the deal were to go sideways and only $500 is in that earnest money deposit, well then they're gonna have to come after you for a much larger amount if you caused any damages or went and just backed out of the contract for no reason. Now there are several ways that you can actually get that earnest money deposit back if the deal were to fall through. If for whatever reason that the deal were to fall through because of something silly, the seller is concerned because now they have to go back on market. And what does everybody say once the house has gone back on the market?
What's wrong with it?
And the likelihood that they're going to get an offer that is as good on the first time around when everyone is emotionally invested in negotiating on this property is just not nearly as high the second time around as it is the first time around. So if you can make your earnest money deposit non-refundable for a couple different reasons, one might be the home inspection contingency. Hey, here's $7,000 earnest money deposit. $2,000 of that is non-refundable if I decide to back out because of the home inspection. This will give the seller some confidence that you're not just going to back out for any little reason. The next two ways that you could get the earnest money deposit back without really any contention would be because of termite and moisture inspection or the appraisal. I understand that that's a risk that you're entering into, but again, if you're competing with 2, 3, 4, 10, 15 other offers, one of the ways you can seem more attractive is removing the risk if you decide to back out of the contract. Now this next one should seem obvious, but guarantee in cash any difference between the appraisal value and the contract value. Now, a good real estate agent should be able to give you an idea of when this probability occurs. If I went out and I hired 10 appraisers, every single one of them is going to come back with a slightly different value. But the range of value should be able to be reasonably determined. So let's just say that the house is listed for $350,000. And your agent goes, hey, look, comps have shown in this area, even with today's market, that they could be a decent argument up to $370,000. Anything over $370,000 is highly likely the appraisal is not going to come back and validate that number. So one of the things that you can do is offer a cash guarantee for any difference between the contract value and the appraisal value. Sometimes this is called an appraisal gap guarantee, but effectively what you're doing is you're offering to make up the difference between the contract value and the appraised value. Now that can be a blank check. You can say, hey, if the appraisal comes in at $345,000, even though we've offered you $375,000, you're now contractually obligated to bring the extra $30,000 to closing. Or you could offer a specific amount. If you don't have unlimited funds, you can look at going and saying, hey, I will offer you a $5,000 or a $10,000 or a $20,000 appraisal guarantee, limiting the risk. Like my lovely wife said earlier, the easiest way to get a hold of us is the number that's on the screen now, or if you'd like to jump directly into our calendars, there's a link down below where you can do that. Makes it quick and easy, and we can schedule some time to talk about your plans moving in or out of the area. Next category that we're going to talk about is lenders, and not all lenders are the same. You know, you went to high school and you had teachers. Not all your teachers are the same. You probably have a favorite one that was out there and they were passionate about what they did. They came to school prepared every single day and they did an amazing job of conveying information. Same thing in the lending world. You want to make sure you're partnered up with a lender that really has your best at heart and knows what the hell they're doing. The first thing I want to talk about under the lending category really has to do with the difference between a pre-qualification, a pre-approval, and being fully underwritten. Now, every bank calls this a little something different, but really the pre-qualification, the first layer there, is you apply, they run your credit, you tell them how much you make, they haven't verified anything, but you get back a letter that says, sure, you can go out and buy a home up to $450,000. They haven't verified jack diddly. How do they actually know that you can do this, right? So the pre-approval process is when you go and there's a standard amount of information that you're gonna submit every single time. Bank statements, W-2s, taxes, a litany of other list of items that my wife would go over. Now, once you've submitted those, the bank sometimes has questions around your financial situation. Let's say that you have some commission income. Well, they may go through and verify the last 2 years of commission income to make sure that when they say, yes, you can afford $450, when that actually goes through and all the federal and state regulations are behind underwriting, that you actually meet the pre-approval process and are actually qualified to buy that $450,000 house. Doing all of that, doing that for first and second round is what's called being fully underwritten. Now, if you can actually go out in today's marketplace and be fully underwritten, and then the lender and the agent do a good job of conveying that to the listing agent and to the seller, basically you're as good as cash. Having a really good loan officer that has good systems, processes, and teams around them also allow them the freedom to call the listing agent on your behalf. If they're too busy, they're not going to be able to do this, or if they don't have the right team structure around them. So every time that we submit an offer, we CC the lender on that submittal. Rachel will actually call the listing agent and tell them, hey, this person's well qualified, they have a great credit profile, they can't tell them certain details, but what they're trying to do is instill confidence in the listing agent that they're making a good decision choosing you over some other person. One of the extra things that Rachel does, and some lenders do, what I absolutely love, is a close on time guarantee. Now, once Rachel has made a bet, she said, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we can close you in 20 days. You've been fully pre-approved and underwritten. As soon as we submit the appraisal on time, and as long as it comes back within this timeline and you get all of the documents in that we ask of you, we can close in 20 days guaranteed, or I'm gonna give you $500. Now that $500 actually comes out of her pocket or the lender's pocket. They don't wanna give you that money. So if they can tell the listing agent that they've provided that cash guarantee of a close on time guarantee, that gives even more confidence that taking your offer over a cash offer has less risk than they initially anticipated. Now I realize that I'm going over a ton of things here, and if you're this far into the video, please hang with me, because each one of these little things can drastically influence the overall chances of you winning your offer. This next one is super important. If you have, let's say that you're out looking at in the purchase price range of $350 to $450, but you are low debt, great credit, and you can actually afford, right? Because banks do this, they'll say, hey, you can purchase up all the way up to $800,000. You're looking at that mortgage payment going, hey, that's great. There's no way in hell I'm actually gonna buy that much house. Send over your full pre-approval to the listing agent and to the seller. Let them see that you can actually buy an $800,000 house, even though you're only shopping in the $450 range. Think about it this way. If you're a seller and you're evaluating two different offers, one is you're putting the minimum amount down, maybe even using 100% financing, and the approval letter that they get is right up against the amount that you're selling your home for, versus one that is 20% down and the approval letter that you have is substantially over the list price. Which one as a seller are you gonna take? Now, this is one I've seen that's popped up several times lately more often. And this is where listing agents or sellers are showing preferential treatment over local lenders versus national lenders. Local lenders tend to know what's going on in the market. They tend to be a little bit more organized. They don't have tons and tons of leads coming from internet leads, and so they treat every single person, the local lender, as an actual individual than a bulk number that's just coming in from the internet. I've had deals fall apart because the national lender was just cranking through pre-approvals and missed a few things. Come to find out 2 or 3 weeks later, they weren't actually qualified to purchase the home. Lastly here on lenders, and I'm gonna finish this, is you need to make sure that you have your financing locked in before you actually go out and look at homes. It makes you look very fickle if you have to write into the contract that I'm shopping 14 different lenders. Now, in our contract in the coastal Virginia area, you actually have to write into the contract who you're planning on using. I can write in there, this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, but that might instill a little bit of not confidence in you, because it's like, well, can this person even qualify? Are they going to all these other lenders because the first one denied them and the second one denied them and they're just trying to make something work? I want to know as a seller that you're a solid buyer. Not to mention that in our contract, you actually technically have to get the seller's permission legally to switch lenders. This next category is, what is the seller obligated to do? Now, every contract, if you're watching this from a different state from Virginia, is a little bit different. But typically there are obligations that every seller is going to have to perform on regardless of state. In our area, if the section is left blank, the seller is automatically obligated to about 1% or 1% of the purchase price. So if this is $400,000, that is $4,000 for 4 different categories. Those categories are things found on the termite and moisture, things that are required from the appraisal conditions. So VA, FHA, I'm looking at you. You've got minimum property standards and minimum property requirements that you require on those appraisals. 3 would be water and septic, and 4 would be walkthrough. Now, if you can remove some of that, of what the seller is obligated to, let's say take it from 1% down to 0.5% or even 0.25%, that is going to make your offer look more attractive. The seller is going to look more favorably if they're only obligated up to $1,000. Now, this is what they're agreeing to outright. Obviously, if there are more things that come because of the inspections, the termite moisture appraisal, so on and so forth, that becomes negotiable, right? Either the buyer brings the money, the seller brings the money, or there's some combination of both, or the contract falls apart, right? So if you can lower the amount or basically come in and promise that, hey, you're only going to be financially obligated to this amount, your offer is going to look more attractive. Now, you can actually, as a buyer, outright state, hey, I, as the buyer, if there's, let's say that you have to use the VA loan or the FHA loan to buy the property, and that's the only way that you can get in there. You can tell them, hey, look, if anything comes up on those appraisal conditions, I'll help you take care of them, right? Because you don't want them to discriminate against you because of those loan products. Like I just mentioned, there are minimum property standards and minimum property requirements that both of those overlays on those appraisals require. You might want to take a look at those and the list of that prior to committing to that obligation. The third category there, the water and septic, the buyer or the seller can order, and the buyer or seller can pay for the inspection and also to have it pumped. Again, another category that if you take that off of the seller's plate, it makes your offer more attractive. The walkthrough is one that you want to be careful with here because they're effectively agreeing to, in that 1% rule that we were talking about earlier, is that let's say that there was a leak in the house and there was some damage. The seller is obligated to convey the property to you as agreed upon in the initial contract. And so if there was something major that happened, this may be a category you want to be careful about agreeing to take on. The final category here in the seller's obligations is going to be just taking stuff off of their plate. Now, you have the option, if you want to offer to cover some of the seller's closing costs. And this can be a sneaky way to be a little more competitive because it has nothing to do with the appraisal value, but puts more money into the seller's pocket. This is 1 to 3%. So on that $350,000, if 1% is $3,500 and you're offering to pay that, that puts more money in the seller's pocket that the cash offer may not have thought about. All right, seller's love letters. A lot of agents do not want you to submit a seller love letter because it could broach some fair housing laws and enter into some discriminatory territory. And I totally get it, right? That can be super nerve-wracking. Matter of fact, when I work with sellers, a lot of times I will ask them, hey, if I get a seller love letter, do you want me to filter out and throw it in the trash to help them stay objective when they're trying to measure out the multiple offers that they're weighing to see what's going to be the most net for them? Because I've been on the opposite side where the seller said, Dan, I really want to submit this seller love letter, and they won. And they won at more than a $10,000 difference over the next highest person because the seller loved the fact that they were like them. It was a family. It wasn't an investor. It wasn't someone that was going to come in and tear the property out. They appreciated what they had done with the property. So it is an opportunity where you can put together what you love about the property, how you want to live there, and how much it means to you. I'm not going to read it. I'm probably just going to submit it to them. Be careful with it, but it is a category that if you want to try it, it can be effective. Hey, and if all else fails, this one will work above any other. Buy them a puppy.